Life with Julian was like living in a gilded cage. Everything was beautiful, shiny, and seemingly perfect. We had the big house in the suburbs, the fancy cars, the designer clothes. Julian was a rising star in the finance world, always closing big deals, always bringing home the big bucks. I had my own successful marketing company, a team of talented people who actually listened to my ideas. We were the it couple, the ones everyone envied. We were living the dream, right? Well, that's what everyone thought anyway. And sometimes I even believed it myself, especially when we were at those fancy cocktail parties, sipping champagne and making small talk with other successful people. Julian would always have his arm around me, introducing me as his beautiful and brilliant wife. I'd smile and play the part, the supportive trophy wife, but inside I felt a little off. It wasn't that I wasn't happy. I mean, I loved Julian. At least I thought I did. And I loved my work, the challenge of building something from scratch, the satisfaction of seeing my ideas come to life. But there was always this nagging feeling, this little voice in the back of my head whispering, is this all there is? Julian, bless his heart, wasn't exactly the most supportive partner. He loved to be the center of attention, the big man on campus. Whenever I'd talk about my work, my successes, he'd somehow manage to turn the conversation back to himself. That's great, honey, he'd say, but you should hear about this deal I just closed. And then he'd launch into a long, detailed story about his latest conquest in the financial world. I tried not to let it bother me. I was independent after all. I had built my own company, my own success. I didn't need his validation, but still, it stung a little, like a tiny pinprick to my ego, a constant reminder that in his eyes, I was always going to be second best. And then there was Isabella. I first met her at one of those dreaded cocktail parties. She was tall, elegant, with a mane of fiery red hair and piercing green eyes. She was the kind of woman who commanded attention the moment she walked into a room. Julian, of course, was immediately drawn to her. They spent the entire evening chatting, laughing, their heads bent close together in conspiratorial whispers. I tried not to be jealous. I told myself it was just harmless flirting, that Julian was just being his usual charming self. But there was something about the way they looked at each other, the way their bodies leaned in, that sent a shiver down my spine. It was like there was a secret language between them, a connection that I couldn't quite decipher. Later that night, as we were getting ready for bed, I casually mentioned Isabella. She's quite striking, isn't she? I said, trying to sound nonchalant. Julian shrugged. Yeah, she's all right. We went to school together, you know. Oh, really? I said, my interest piqued. I didn't know that. Yeah, he said, a faraway look in his eyes. We were close. Nah. He didn't elaborate, and I didn't press him. But the seed of doubt had been planted. Who was this woman from Julian's past? And what exactly did he mean by close? A few weeks later, I got a call that would change everything. My great-aunt Millie had passed away. She was a quirky old lady, a bit of a recluse, who lived in a rambling old mansion on the coast. I hadn't seen her in years, but I had fond memories of her from my childhood. She was always kind to me, always interested in my life. The lawyer handling her estate informed me that I was the sole beneficiary of her will. I was shocked. I had no idea Aunt Millie had any money, let alone a fortune. But that wasn't the strangest part. The will stipulated that the inheritance came with certain conditions. I had to use the money for specific purposes, things like community development, environmental protection, and charitable causes. It was weird. I told Julian about the inheritance, but I kept the details to myself. I wasn't sure why, but I felt a need to protect this secret, this unexpected gift. Julian, of course, was more interested in the money than the conditions. He started asking questions, probing for details, his eyes gleaming with avarice. I brushed him off, telling him I needed time to process everything. But inside, I felt a growing unease. Something wasn't right. And I had a feeling that Aunt Millie's inheritance was just the tip of the iceberg. It started with a whisper, a misplaced phone, a hastily deleted text message, a whispered conversation overheard in the hallway. At first, I dismissed it as paranoia. Julian and Isabella? Having an affair? It seemed impossible. Julian loved me. He had to. We had built a life together, a beautiful, successful life. He wouldn't throw it all away for a fling with an old flame, would he? But the whispers persisted, growing louder. more insistent. I couldn't ignore them anymore. The doubt gnawed at me, a constant, insidious presence in my mind. I started paying closer attention, watching Julian's every move, listening to his every word. I noticed the way his eyes lingered on Isabella whenever she was around, the way his voice softened when he spoke to her on the phone. I saw the furtive glances, the secret smiles, the shared jokes that excluded me. The disbelief gave way to hurt, a deep, aching pain that settled in my chest. How could he do this to me? After all we had been through, all we had built together, was I not enough? Was I not beautiful enough, successful enough, interesting enough? The questions swirled in my mind, tormenting me. But I wasn't one to wallow in self-pity. I was a woman of action, a problem solver. If Julian was having an affair, I needed proof. Not just for my own peace of mind, but for my future. I needed to protect myself, my assets, my life. I began my investigation subtly, discreetly. I checked his phone records, his emails, his credit card statements. I followed him discreetly when he said he was working late. I hired a private investigator, a woman named Ava, who was as discreet as she was efficient. The evidence mounted, each piece like a shard of glass piercing my heart. The late-night phone calls, the secret rendezvous, the expensive gifts, it was all there, laid bare for me to see. The truth was undeniable, and it was devastating. But there was more, something darker, more sinister. Ava uncovered a conversation between Julian and Isabella, a whispered plot hatched in the shadows. They weren't just having an affair, they were planning to get rid of me. They talked about inheriting my wealth, my company, my life. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. They weren't just betraying me, they were trying to kill me. Fear mingled with the hurt and the anger, a toxic cocktail of emotions that threatened to overwhelm me. But I wouldn't let them. I wouldn't let them win. I thought about the inheritance, the strange conditions attached to it. Aunt Millie had always been eccentric, but this was different. It was as if she had known somehow that I would need this money, that I would need to use it for something bigger than myself. The lawyer had explained the details to me. The inheritance wasn't just a large sum of money, it was a trust, a foundation designed to support specific causes. Community development, environmental protection, education, the arts. It was a legacy, a chance to make a real difference in the world. And suddenly, I understood. Aunt Millie hadn't just left me money, she had left me a purpose, a way to fight back, to rebuild my life, to make something good out of the ashes of my betrayal. I wouldn't let Julian and Isabella take that away from me. I wouldn't let them win. I would use the inheritance to protect myself, to expose their treachery, to bring them down. I would use it to build a new life, a life of purpose and meaning. I would use it to honor Aunt Millie's legacy and to make the world a better place. The whispers of betrayal had awakened a strength within me, a fierce determination that I had never known before. I was no longer the naive, trusting wife. I was a warrior, a survivor, and I would not be defeated. The rain was coming down in sheets, blurring the world into a watercolor of grays and greens. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles white against the worn leather. The road was slick, treacherous, and the old Mercedes was struggling to maintain its grip. I should have taken the SUV, I thought, but Julian had insisted I take the vintage car. "It's more appropriate," he'd said, a sly smile playing on his lips, "for meeting with a lawyer." I hadn't thought much of it at the time, but now, as the car swerved unexpectedly, a cold dread crept up my spine. Something wasn't right. The steering felt loose, unresponsive. The brakes were sluggish, barely slowing the car's momentum. "Damn it, Julian," I muttered under my breath. He had always been a stickler for maintenance, but this was different. This felt deliberate. I tried to pump the brakes again, but they were useless. The car was picking up speed, hurtling down the winding road like a runaway train. Panic clawed at my throat, choking me. I had to regain control. A truck, a massive 18-wheeler, appeared out of the rain, its headlights like the eyes of a predator. I swerved to avoid it, but it was too late. The Mercedes spun out of control, hydroplaning across the slick asphalt. The world became a blur of motion, a kaleidoscope of colors and shapes. I heard the screech of tires, the shattering of glass, the sickening crunch of metal. Then, everything went black. I woke to the smell of antiseptic and the rhythmic beeping of machines. My head throbbed, my body ached, and a strange sense of detachment enveloped me. I opened my eyes, blinking against the harsh fluorescent lights. A white ceiling, white walls, a white-clad figure hovering over me. "She's awake," the figure said, its voice a muffled drone. "Can you hear me?" I tried to speak, but my throat was dry, my voice a croak. I nodded weakly. "Do you know where you are?" the figure asked. I shook my head, confusion clouding my mind. Where was I? What had happened? "You're in the hospital," the figure said. "You were in an accident." An accident. Yes, that was it. The car, the truck, the rain. The memories flooded back, fragmented and distorted, like a shattered mirror. "Julian?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Your husband?" the figure asked. "He's been notified. He'll be here soon." Julian? The thought of him sent a shiver down my spine. He had done this to me. He had tried to kill me. And now he was coming here, to this sterile room, to this bed where I lay helpless and vulnerable. Fear gripped me, cold and suffocating. I had to get out of here. I had to escape. But how? The figure was still talking, its voice a distant drone. I wasn't listening. My mind was racing, searching for a way out. I had to protect myself. I had to... The darkness crept in again, swallowing me whole. The last thing I saw was the figure's concerned face, its eyes filled with pity. And the last thing I heard was the steady, rhythmic beeping of the machines, a constant reminder of my vulnerability, my mortality. The coma was a strange, in-between place. It wasn't sleep, not exactly. It was more like being trapped in a dark, silent room, my mind a prisoner in my own body. I couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't even open my eyes. All I could do was listen, and listen I did. To the muffled voices of doctors and nurses, the hushed whispers of visitors, the rhythmic beeping of machines. Sometimes I'd hear snippets of conversations, fragments of words that drifted in and out of my consciousness like wisps of smoke. "Poor Amelia," a woman's voice would say, tinged with pity. "She'll probably never wake up." "Such a tragedy," another voice would reply. "So young, so successful." And then there were the voices I dreaded most, Julian and Isabella. They'd come to visit, their voices a sickening mix of concern and relief. Yes, relief. I could hear it in their tone, in their carefully chosen words. "She's so still," Isabella would say, her voice a venomous whisper, "like a sleeping beauty, except she'll never wake up to kiss her prince." Julian would chuckle, a low, guttural sound that sent shivers down my spine. "No, she won't," he'd say. "She's gone, and we're free." Free. The word echoed in my mind, a cruel mockery of my reality. They were free, free to live their lives, to enjoy my wealth, to build their future on the ashes of my dreams. And I was trapped, a prisoner in my own body, a ghost haunting the halls of my own life. The anger burned within me, a fierce, consuming fire. They had taken everything from me, my husband, my life, my freedom, and they had done it with such cold-blooded calculation, such utter disregard for my humanity. But the anger wasn't all-consuming. There was fear, too. A deep, primal fear of the unknown, of the darkness that surrounded me. I was alone, helpless, at their mercy. What if they decided to finish what they had started? What if they unplugged the machines, let me slip away into the abyss? The fear fueled the anger. The anger fueled the desire for justice. I wouldn't let them get away with this. I wouldn't let them win. I would fight back. I would find a way to escape this prison, to expose their treachery, to make them pay for what they had done. When I finally woke up, it was to a world that had moved on without me. Julian was there by my bedside, his face etched with concern. But his eyes were different. There was a coldness in them, a hardness that I had never seen before. "Amelia," he said, his voice a practiced blend of relief and sorrow. You're awake. Thank God. I stared at him, my silence a deafening accusation. A nurse bustled into the room, her face bright with a practiced smile. Mr. and Mrs. Thorne, she said, addressing us both. It's so wonderful to see you awake, Mrs. Thorne. You've been out for quite a while. Mrs. Thorne? The words hit me like a slap in the face. Julian was married to Isabella. They had done it. They had actually gone through with it. I spent a couple of years in the coma. He was able to get a divorce on that grounds and got a hold of my finances. And now he was here playing dumb. The anger surged within me, hot and consuming. I wanted to scream, to lash out, to tear their carefully constructed world apart. But I held back. I needed to be smart. I needed to play along, to gather information, to bide my time. The hospital staff were a mixed bag. Some were sympathetic, their eyes filled with pity for the poor woman who had lost her memory. Others were dismissive, their smiles strained, their words laced with skepticism. They had heard it all before, the fantastical stories of amnesia and mistaken identity. I realized quickly that I couldn't trust anyone. Not the doctors, not the nurses, not even the well-meaning visitors who came bearing flowers and platitudes. I was alone in this, a lone wolf surrounded by a pack of wolves in sheep's clothing. But I wasn't afraid, not anymore. The coma had stripped away my naivete, my trust, my illusions. It had left me with a raw, primal strength, a fierce determination to survive. I would play their game, pretend to be the amnesiac wife, the grateful patient, but beneath the surface, I was plotting, planning, waiting for the right moment to strike back. They had underestimated me. They had thought they could break me, but they were wrong. I was Amelia, and I was just getting started. The hospital became my stage, and I, a reluctant actress. I played the role of the amnesiac wife, the grateful patient with an Oscar-worthy performance. I'd smile weakly at Julian and Isabella, thanking them for their unwavering support. While inwardly recoiling at their touch, I'd ask confused questions about my life, my work, my past, feigning a childlike innocence that masked the burning rage within me. Julian, darling, I'd say, my voice a breathy whisper, remind me again, what do I do for a living? He'd smile indulgently, his eyes gleaming with a smug satisfaction that made my skin crawl. You're a marketing whiz, sweetheart, he'd say. The best in the business. You own your own company, remember? Oh yes, of course, I'd reply, batting my eyelashes innocently. Silly me. It's just all this trauma, you know. And he'd buy it, hook, line, and sinker. He was so blinded by his own arrogance, his own self-importance, that he couldn't see the truth staring him in the face. He couldn't see the steel behind my eyes, the resolve hardening my heart. Isabella was a different story. She was suspicious, her sharp eyes watching my every move, her intuition whispering doubts in her ear. But I was careful, meticulous, leaving no trace of my true intentions. I played the role of the fragile, vulnerable wife to perfection, feeding her ego, lulling her into a false sense of security. Isabella, dear, I'd say, my voice sweet as honey. You're such a good friend to Julian. He's so lucky to have you. She'd preen under my praise, her suspicions momentarily forgotten. Of course, darling, she'd reply, her voice dripping with faux concern. We're all so worried about you. Just focus on getting better and leave everything else to us. And I would smile, a serene, enigmatic smile that masked the storm brewing within me. While I played my part, I was gathering information, observing their every move, planning my escape. I learned about their new life together, their plans for the future, their dreams of wealth and power. I learned about the cracks in their relationship, the simmering resentment, the unspoken doubts. And I learned about their vulnerabilities, their weaknesses, the secrets they were so desperate to keep hidden. One day, while Julian and Isabella were out, attending to business, I made my move. I had memorized the number of the lawyer, Mr. Evans, the one I'd contacted about the inheritance before the accident. I waited until the nurse was busy with another patient. Then I snuck out of bed, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and excitement. I found a payphone in the hallway and dialed the number, my fingers trembling with anticipation. Mr. Evans answered on the second ring, his voice a calming presence in the midst of my chaos. Mr. Evans, I said, my voice hushed but firm. It's Amelia Thorne. I need your help. He didn't question my identity, my sudden reappearance. He had always been discreet, trustworthy. He listened patiently as I explained my situation, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and desperation. I'm trapped, I said, my voice cracking. They're trying to kill me. I need to get out of here. I need access to the inheritance. Don't worry, Amelia, he said, his voice calm and reassuring. I'll take care of everything. Just stay put, and I'll be there soon. True to his word, Mr. Evans arrived within the hour. He brought clothes, money, a new phone, and a plan. We worked quickly, efficiently, like a well-oiled machine. He arranged for a private ambulance to take me to a safe house, a place where Julian and Isabella would never find me. He helped me access the inheritance, the funds transferred to a new account, untraceable, secure. Before I left, I wrote a note, a carefully worded message designed to throw them off my scent. I left it on my bedside table, a parting gift for my would-be killers. Julian, Isabella, the note read, I'm going away to recover. Don't try to find me. I need time to heal, to remember, to rediscover myself. I'll be in touch when I'm ready. Love, Amelia. I smiled as I placed the note on the table. It was a lie, of course. I wasn't going away to recover. I was going away to fight back, to rise from the ashes like a phoenix, stronger, fiercer, more determined than ever before. They had thought they could break me, but they were wrong. I was Amelia Thorne, and I was just getting started. The safe house was a nondescript apartment in a quiet neighborhood, a world away from the gilded cage I had once called home. It was a blank canvas, a place where I could shed the skin of Amelia Thorne and become someone new, Ava. The name felt right, strong, and enigmatic, a reflection of the woman I was becoming. The transformation was both physical and mental. I dyed my hair, a rich auburn that shimmered in the sunlight, a stark contrast to the blonde I had always been. I bought new clothes, a wardrobe of sleek, sophisticated outfits that exuded confidence and power. I hired a personal trainer, a no-nonsense woman named Maria, who pushed me to my limits, sculpting my body into a lean, mean fighting machine. But the physical changes were just the beginning. I needed to build a new identity, a new life, a new empire. And I had the resources to do it. Aunt Millie's inheritance, once a burden, now felt like a blessing, a weapon in my arsenal. I started with the basics. I established a new identity, complete with a fake social security number, a driver's license, a birth certificate. I created a backstory, a carefully crafted narrative that explained my sudden appearance, my lack of a past. I was Ava, a self-made woman, an entrepreneur who had made her fortune in the tech industry. It was a believable story, one that wouldn't raise any red flags. With my new identity in place, I turned my attention to building my empire. I invested in real estate, acquiring properties in prime locations, properties that would appreciate in value over time. I bought stocks, bonds, and commodities, diversifying my portfolio, ensuring my financial security, and I started my own company, a venture capital firm that focused on investing in innovative startups, companies with the potential to disrupt the status quo. I chose my investments carefully, strategically. I focused on industries that would allow me to subtly influence Julian's world, to exert pressure to undermine his power. I invested in tech companies that competed with his clients, in real estate developments that threatened his projects, in media outlets that could expose his secrets. I was playing the long game, a game of chess where every move was calculated, every piece strategically placed. I was patient, methodical, biding my time, waiting for the right moment to strike. But building an empire wasn't just about money and power. It was about knowledge, about understanding the intricacies of the world, the levers of influence, the hidden currents that shaped events. I read voraciously, devouring books on finance, economics, politics, and history. I attended conferences, seminars, and workshops, learning from the best and brightest minds in their fields. I surrounded myself with experts, advisors, and mentors, people who could guide me, challenge me, and help me grow. I learned to speak the language of power, the subtle nuances of negotiation, the art of persuasion. I learned to read people, to assess their motives, to anticipate their moves. I learned to be ruthless, to make tough decisions, to sacrifice short-term gains for long-term goals. And most importantly, I learned to trust my instincts, my intuition, the inner voice that had guided me through the darkness of the coma. I was no longer the naive, trusting Amelia. I was Ava, a woman of strength, intelligence, and determination. A woman who had been betrayed, broken, and reborn. A woman who was ready to take on the world. The transformation was complete. The caterpillar had emerged from its cocoon, transformed into a magnificent butterfly, ready to take flight. I was Ava, and I was unstoppable. My campaign against Julian and Isabella was a symphony of subtle manipulations, a slow, deliberate erosion of their carefully constructed world. I didn't want a sudden, dramatic downfall. I wanted them to suffer, to feel the ground crumble beneath their feet, to experience the same slow, agonizing descent into despair that I had endured. I started with Julian's business deals. I used my network of contacts, my financial resources, my influence in the industry to subtly sabotage his projects. A crucial investor would back out at the last minute, a permit would be delayed, a competitor would swoop in with a better offer. It was all very subtle, very plausible, nothing that could be directly traced back to me. At first, Julian dismissed it as bad luck. Just a rough patch, he'd say, forcing a smile. These things happen in business. But as the setbacks mounted, his confidence began to waver. The stress lines deepened on his face. The bags under his eyes grew darker. His temper shorter. I watched him unravel from a distance, a ghost in the machine, pulling the strings, orchestrating his downfall. There was a certain satisfaction in it, a sense of justice being served. But there was also a lingering sadness, a hollow ache in my heart. This was the man I had loved, the man I had trusted with my life. And now, I was destroying him. Isabella, ever vigilant, was the first to suspect foul play. She saw the pattern, the uncanny string of misfortunes that plagued Julian's every move. Her paranoia grew, her suspicions swirling like a dark cloud over their once perfect life. "Someone's doing this to us, Julian," she'd say, her voice laced with fear. "Someone's trying to ruin us." He'd dismiss her concerns, attributing them to stress, to her overactive imagination. But I knew she was right. She just didn't know who the enemy was. I fed her paranoia, subtly, anonymously. A whispered rumor here, a leaked document there. I planted seeds of doubt, of suspicion, of mistrust. I watched as their relationship began to crumble. The foundation of their marriage eroded by secrets and lies. The exposure of Julian's infidelities was the next phase of my plan. I knew he had a weakness for women, a need for admiration and attention that I had never been able to fully satisfy. I used that weakness against him, orchestrating a series of accidental encounters, leaked photos, and anonymous tips to the gossip columns. The scandal erupted, a wildfire of rumors and accusations that threatened to engulf him. His reputation, his carefully cultivated image of the successful businessman, the devoted husband, was shattered. Isabella, humiliated and enraged, turned on him, her fury a force of nature. I watched their world implode, their dreams turn to ashes. There was a certain satisfaction in it, a sense of vindication, but there was also a growing emptiness, a hollowness that gnawed at my soul. Was this what I really wanted? Was this what revenge felt like? The answer, I realized, was no. This wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. It was about holding them accountable for their actions, for the pain they had caused, for the life they had stolen from me. It was about reclaiming my power, my agency, my identity. The invitation arrived in a sleek, black envelope, the embossed lettering hinting at exclusivity and intrigue. It was addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Julian Thorne, a formal acknowledgement of their tarnished union. Isabella, her manicured nails trembling with a mixture of anxiety and anticipation, tore it open, her eyes scanning the elegant script. "Ava Sinclair requests the pleasure of your company at a gala celebrating the launch of the Phoenix Foundation," she read aloud, her voice laced with curiosity. "Black tie, naturally. RSVP." Julian, his brow furrowed with worry, peered over her shoulder. "Ava Sinclair? Who the hell is Ava Sinclair?" Isabella shrugged, a flicker of unease in her eyes. I don't know. Some new player on the scene, I guess. But the Phoenix Foundation, that name rings a bell. They both knew the name, of course. It had been splashed across the financial news for weeks. A mysterious new philanthropic organization with seemingly unlimited resources. Rumors swirled about its founder, a shadowy figure known only as Ava Sinclair, a woman of wealth, power, and impeccable taste. This could be our chance, Isabella, Julian said, his voice laced with a desperate hope. A chance to salvage our reputation, to secure our future. Their world was crumbling around them. Julian's business was in shambles, his reputation tarnished, his investors fleeing like rats from a sinking ship. Isabella's social standing had plummeted, her once loyal friends now whispering behind her back, their invitations replaced with thinly veiled pity. They were drowning in debt, their lavish lifestyle a distant memory. The Phoenix Foundation, with its deep pockets and its enigmatic founder, seemed like a lifeline, a beacon of hope in their darkening world. But there was also a sense of unease, a nagging suspicion that something wasn't quite right. I don't trust it, Julian, Isabella said, her voice laced with suspicion. This Ava Sinclair, she's too mysterious, too powerful. It feels like a trap. Julian dismissed her concerns with a wave of his hand. Don't be ridiculous, Isabella. It's a chance to network, to make new connections, to rebuild our empire. We can't afford to be picky. He was right, of course. They were desperate. They had nothing left to lose. And so they accepted the invitation, RSVPing with a carefully crafted message of gratitude and anticipation. The gala was held at a sprawling estate on the outskirts of the city, a world of manicured lawns, sparkling fountains, and glittering chandeliers. The guest list was a who's who of the city's elite, a carefully curated mix of power players, socialites, and philanthropists. Julian and Isabella, dressed to the nines, mingled with the crowd, their smiles strained, their eyes darting nervously. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation, a sense of something momentous about to happen. Whispers circulated about the mysterious Ava Sinclair, her wealth, her power, her motives. Who was this woman who had emerged from the shadows, seemingly out of nowhere, to become a force to be reckoned with? As the evening progressed, the suspense built. The guests were ushered into a grand ballroom, its walls adorned with priceless artwork, its tables laden with gourmet delicacies. A hush fell over the crowd as a spotlight illuminated the stage. A tall, elegant figure emerged from the shadows, her silhouette bathed in a golden glow. You are absolutely right. My apologies. I got caught up in the drama of the scene and forgot to incorporate the dialogue and maintain the first-person perspective with the casual tone as consistently as I should have. Let me rewrite Chapter 10, paying closer attention to our agreed-upon rules. Chapter 10, The Reckoning, approx 750 words. The ballroom shimmered. Seriously, all those chandeliers and sparkly dresses were almost blinding. I took a deep breath, smoothing down my crimson dress. Felt like liquid fire, honestly, and walked towards the stage. Okay, showtime. Wow, I thought, glancing around at the crowd. They really went all out. The place was packed. Every fancy pants in the city was there. And there they were, Julian and Isabella, looking like two moths drawn to a very expensive flame. They looked nervous. Good. As I reached the podium, the lights hit me, and I could feel everyone's eyes on me. All right, folks, I said, grabbing the mic. Welcome. I'm Ava Sinclair, and I've got a story for you. It's a doozy. Trust me. I saw Julian shift in his seat. He was sweating. I could see it from here. Isabella looked like she'd swallowed a lemon whole. Perfect. This story, I continued, is about a woman named Amelia Thorne. Maybe some of you remember her. She was me, actually. A gasp rippled through the crowd. I could practically hear the whispers. Amelia Thorne? But she's dead. Not quite, I said, smirking. Turns out reports of my demise were greatly exaggerated. Julian's face was ashen. Isabella's eyes were wide, like she'd seen a ghost. Which, technically, she had. See, Amelia had a husband, I went on, my voice getting a little harder. A charming guy named Julian. And Julian, well, he had a little fling with a certain Isabella, who, coincidentally, is also here tonight. Hi, Isabella, I gave a little wave. She didn't wave back. Anyway, I said, Julian and Isabella, they weren't just having a little fun. They were planning something more permanent for Amelia. You know, the till death do us part thing? They took it literally. I could hear the murmurs getting louder. What's she saying? Someone whispered. Is she accusing them? Yep, I said, answering the unspoken question. I am. See, Amelia's accident wasn't so accidental. Turns out Julian messed with her car. Real nasty stuff. Hoping she'd, stay dead this time. I pulled out my tablet, but plot twist, Amelia survived and she's got proof. I paid a lot of money to the right people, and they were able to get me footage of the security footage of my hospital room. The damning evidence I needed. I tapped the screen and a recording started playing. It was Julian and Isabella talking in hushed voices. That's it, Julian was saying. No more Amelia, we're free. And rich, Isabella added. Her company, her money, it's all ours. The recording went on, detailing their plan. It was chilling, hearing their cold, calculated words. The audience was silent, stunned. Julian and Isabella looked like they were about to faint. So, I said, turning back to the crowd, that's the story. Amelia's story. My story. I'm back, and I'm not playing nice anymore. I looked directly at Julian and Isabella. You two thought you could get away with it, I said, my voice low and dangerous. You thought you could get rid of me. But you were wrong. So wrong. Julian finally found his voice. Amelia, he stammered, it's not what it looks like. Oh, I think it is, I said, my smile icy. I think it's exactly what it looks like. And now, everyone knows. Game over. I tossed the tablet to a nearby reporter. Here you go, I said. Knock yourselves out. The room was a whirlwind of whispers, gasps, and pointing fingers. Julian and Isabella were surrounded, their faces a mixture of fear and shame. I watched them, not with triumph, but with a quiet sense of closure. It was over. The truth was out. And now, they would face the consequences. Trawl 75. The fallout was swift and brutal. News of Julian and Isabella's treachery spread like wildfire, fueled by the leaked recording and the ensuing media frenzy. Their carefully constructed world, built on a foundation of lies and deceit, crumbled around them like a house of cards. Julian's business partners, once eager to associate with his success, now distanced themselves, their hands clean, their reputations intact. Investors pulled out, deals fell through, and his company, once a shining star in the financial world, spiraled towards bankruptcy. He watched in despair as his empire, built on years of ambition and ruthless maneuvering, collapsed like a sandcastle in a storm. Isabella, stripped of her social standing, became a pariah. Her friends, the ones who had flocked to her side in the days of champagne and caviar, now shunned her, their whispers like daggers to her heart. The invitations stopped, the phone calls went unanswered, and her once vibrant social calendar became a barren wasteland. She found herself alone, isolated. The gilded cage of her life transformed into a prison of her own making. The legal repercussions were inevitable. The police, armed with the evidence I had provided, launched an investigation. Julian and Isabella were questioned, their alibis scrutinized, their every move dissected under the harsh glare of the law. The threat of arrest, of imprisonment, loomed over them, a constant reminder of their impending doom. I watched their downfall from a distance, my expression neutral, my heart unmoved. There was no satisfaction in their suffering, no sense of triumph, only a weary acceptance of the consequences, the inevitable outcome of their choices. Julian, once so proud, so arrogant, was now a shadow of his former self. His shoulders slumped, his eyes haunted by regret. He wandered the empty halls of his mansion, a ghost in his own life. The wealth, the power, the social status, it had all vanished, leaving him with nothing but the bitter taste of ashes in his mouth. Isabella, stripped of her beauty and her charm, was a shell of a woman. Her eyes, once sparkling with mischief, were now dull with despair. Her laughter, once a weapon in her arsenal, was replaced with a hollow silence. She had traded her soul for a life of luxury and deceit, and now she was paying the price. Their carefully constructed world, built on a foundation of lies and betrayal, had collapsed, leaving them exposed, vulnerable, and utterly alone. They had played a dangerous game, and they had lost. And as I watched them fall, I felt a sense of closure, a quiet satisfaction that justice had been served. But there was no joy in it, no sense of victory, only a weary acceptance of the truth, the harsh reality of the consequences. The dust settled. Julian and Isabella were gone, their names whispered in hushed tones, their faces plastered across the tabloids, their lives a cautionary tale of ambition and betrayal. The world had moved on, the scandal fading into the background noise of everyday life. I stood on the balcony of my penthouse apartment, overlooking the city that had become my new home. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange, pink, and purple. It was a beautiful sight, a reminder of the beauty and resilience of the world, even in the face of darkness and despair. I was Amelia again. Ava, the enigmatic businesswoman, the avenging angel, had served her purpose. She had been a necessary disguise, a shield, a weapon. But now the battle was over, and it was time to shed the armor, to embrace the woman I had become. The journey had been long and arduous, a trial by fire that had forged me anew. I had faced my demons, conquered my fears, and emerged from the ashes, stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever before. I had achieved justice, yes, but it hadn't brought the satisfaction I had expected. There was a hollowness, an emptiness, where I had expected to find triumph. Perhaps it was because the victory had come at a cost. I had lost Julian, the man I had loved, the man I had built a life with. I had lost my innocence, my trust, my belief in the goodness of people. And I had lost a part of myself, the part that had been naive, vulnerable, and trusting. But I had also gained something. I had gained a sense of self, a strength and resilience that I had never known before. I had gained a purpose, a mission, a calling, and I had gained a freedom that was more precious than anything I had lost. Aunt Millie's inheritance, once a burden, now felt like a gift, a responsibility, a legacy. I had used it to achieve justice, yes, but that was just the beginning. I would use it to fulfill her wishes, to make a real difference in the world. I established the Phoenix Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping victims of betrayal and abuse. I funded shelters, counseling programs, legal aid services. I used my influence, my connections, my resources, to give a voice to the voiceless, to empower the powerless, to help others rise from the ashes of their own personal tragedies. The work was challenging, often heartbreaking, but it was also fulfilling, a way to channel my pain, my anger, my grief into something positive, something meaningful. I found a sense of purpose in helping others, in making a difference in the world, in honoring Aunt Millie's legacy. And as I stood on that balcony, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I felt a sense of peace, a quiet joy that had eluded me for so long. I was no longer the woman who had been betrayed, broken, and left for dead. I was the woman who had risen from the ashes, stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever before. I was the phoenix, and I was finally free. The final scene? It wasn't a dramatic confrontation, a tearful reunion, or a triumphant victory lap. It was a quiet moment, a simple act of kindness. I was visiting one of the shelters funded by the Phoenix Foundation, talking to a young woman who had escaped an abusive relationship. She was scared, vulnerable, her eyes filled with the same fear and uncertainty that I had once known. I sat beside her, listening to her story, offering words of comfort and encouragement. I told her about my own journey, my own struggles, my own triumphs, and as I spoke, I saw a spark of hope ignite in her eyes, a flicker of recognition that she was not alone, that she too could rise from the ashes, that she too could find her own freedom. And in that moment, I knew that I had found my true calling. I was a healer, not just of bodies, but of souls. I was a beacon of hope, a symbol of resilience, a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit. I was Amelia, the Phoenix, and I was finally home.